Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 32 of the Strokecast. I had an interesting chat with entrepreneur and stroke survivor Tom Hannon the other day, and I've been having all sorts of fascinating chats with various stroke survivors. One of the things that's really striking me lately is just the huge variety of backgrounds that people have before they have their stroke and the backgrounds they continue to have after their stroke. The stories that people bring to this life change are just dramatic and so endlessly varied. I'm lucky to get to talk to so many interesting folks, and I'm certain there are just as many fascinating and interesting stories out there among the audience here. So, while many of us do have the experience of stroke in common, either through a personal experience, through a loved one that we care for, or through our professional work, it's really amazing how that one simple thing can bring so many people together. But back to the topic at hand. Tom had his stroke about 2 years ago due to a vertebral artery dissection, and he has really just made a remarkable recovery. His background as a triathlete certainly helped from both a physical standpoint of him being already in excellent physical condition and a mental perspective where he already had a lot of the training needed to sort of push through and achieve the goals and really work on his recovery. So all of that certainly helped. He lives out on Cape Cod, which is outside the city of Boston here in the U.S. One of the first things that you'll notice in this conversation is that he has a New England accent. Of course, what happens whenever I talk to somebody else with a New England accent or with a New York accent, i.e. somebody who speaks properly, what you'll see happening or what you'll hear happening, and what you're hearing happen now, just as I think about it, is that my own New York accent actually starts to come out quite a bit stronger. It's one of those things that happens whenever I talk to somebody from the East with a stronger accent, or if I have a couple of drinks, or if I am just really tired. This time it's just because of the conversation. The rest of today hasn't been quite that interesting. But regardless, that's why we're talking like that. Tom Hannon is a serial entrepreneur who has started, bought, and sold more than 12 businesses during his more than 30-year career. Most of those businesses focused on magazines, advertising, and magazine distribution. He also helps entrepreneurs learn to effectively market and sell their own businesses when the time is right. You can visit winyourexit.com for more details on that program. He's also a sales and marketing educator who, with his wife Linda, has now launched a financial education site called 6 Steps to Mastering Your Money and Creating a Path to Financial Freedom over at realfamilyfinance.com. Tom is also an avid baseball fan who owned a historical baseball website and once built a replica of the Brooklyn Dodgers' former home, Ebbets Field. He was also an avid triathlete, and while training for the epic Ironman triathlon, he suffered his vertebral artery dissection, which caused 6 mini strokes. So now he adds stroke survivor onto his resume. So now, let's meet Tom Hannon. So Tom, welcome to the Strokecast. I'm just thrilled you were able to join us this week.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on and let me tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard a little bit of your story so far, and I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we get into, sort of the recovery story, what was life like for you before the stroke?
Yeah, I still am, but I've definitely backed off a lot. I was a real type A person. I had a business that I worked really hard. It was a physical business. And I had a busy social life, and I was also a triathlete. So I was training for Ironman probably 10 months out of the year. So it was a pretty busy life that entailed about 15 hours of foot on the gas pedal every day.
Wow. I look at that and, historically, I get tired driving 26 miles.
Yeah. Well, if anyone doesn't know what an Ironman is, I was training for a 146.6 mile race. So it's a 2.4 mile swim, 114 on the bike, and then you run a marathon, and you have to do it within 17 hours. So.
Wow. So what was your career like? What were you doing at that point?
I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. And at the time, I owned a distribution and advertising business. So when you go into a supermarket and you see a rack for free magazines and brochures, and there's an advertisement on the top of it, that was basically my business. So at the time of the event, I was probably distributing 100 magazines across 6 states.
That's one of those tons of industries that are out there that you never actually think are a thing or a business until you get into the industry and you start seeing all of this other stuff that's out there.
Well, that's very true. And I spent the better part of my 30 years in that business. And I sold the same exact business several times. So I kept creating this business for free publications and distribution and advertising and selling them. And it was really it was a nice little career. It's over now, but it was it was a good thing. No one can believe that you could continue to do that, but you can.
Right.
If you're good at it.
Right, and figure it out and do the lather, rinse, repeat.
Yeah, because we would start businesses, we would buy businesses, we would go through the whole entrepreneurial journey. So,
of course, that all changed when you had your stroke. So, what happened that day? What was your stroke like?
Well, I mean, it was really strange because the day was a normal day for me. I got up and I rode my bike 25 miles and went to work and threw magazines around all day, and I felt great. I felt as good as I've ever felt. And then I would swim at nighttime, and I was in part of a master swim group. And the water, I was about 750 meters into my swim, and the water got cold. And I was like, and people don't know this, but you actually sweat when you swim. So I'm like, this is weird. So I got to the edge of the pool, and I got out of the pool, and I talked to my swim instructor, and she's like, she knew right away what was happening. She had experience with it. So she said, "Tom, you're having a stroke." And I said, "What?" I said, "How can that be?" Because I couldn't even touch, she wanted me to touch my nose, and I ended up like touching my ear, Mm-hmm. And so she sat me down. She called 911. My wife does triathlons, well, used to, with me as well. And she was in the pool lane next to me. So she thought I was just being like a diva, because I could tend to be that way sometimes. And but I was like, this was serious. And so they, she called 911. The ambulance came. I was in the hospital my story is the story of the whole fast being a success story, because they had me in the hospital in 30 minutes.
Wow.
It was like lightning. And they video conferenced a neurosurgeon in, and they did that. They did the dye test, the CAT scan with the dye test, and which it was awful. I felt at the time, I can't even. You went through it, so you understand how awful you feel. And I was getting sick all over the place, and I kept getting those massive ringing headaches, and I was falling apart. Really, is what was happening. And I think I had 6 mini strokes at the time.
Wow.
And that's when, the doctor came in and he told me what I had. See, I don't know, what everybody has a different thing, what causes a stroke, and what caused mine was I had vertebral artery dissection. So a vertebral artery dissection is, you have 2 arteries that run up the back of your spine, and they run to your brain. And that artery tore. And when it tore, I ended up getting a blood clot. And it could have been a week, it could have been a day, it could have been an hour. You just don't really know when you did it. It just happened. So that's when he explained to us that's what happened. And And then, they told us that they could give us this drug called TPA. And there was a 96% chance that I would be, it was going to stop the strokes, and it would give me the highest chance of full recovery. And then there was an argument between my neurosurgeon, who was being video conferenced in, and the ER doctor, because it was a dissection. He thought I was going to bleed out.
Right.
And but when you tear your artery, it's not like you tear your artery and it's bleeding into your body. It's like an internal thing. You tear the flap on the inside of it.
Right.
So
like the lining of the artery gets torn, and that then starts throwing junk in, which allows clots to form around that.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And I guess it was a fairly large tear, but I mean, at the time, it's just a tear, right? I mean, you don't even know.
None of that is supposed to tear.
Right. You don't think it's ever, you don't even know about this thing. I mean, and just anybody who's listening, just so you know, there's a 1% chance this will happen to you. So there's not a lot of people that end up with a vertebral artery dissection. It's very, very rare. So the neurosurgeon would not get off the call until they gave me the TPA. And because we had asked, my wife asked him, if this was your wife, what would you do? And he said he'd give you the TPA. And I said, 96% chance sounds good to me. I'm falling apart here. And finally they did give me the TPA as I was on my way, because it happened on Cape Cod, and I was on my way to Boston Medical Center.
Sure.
So they gave it to me in the ambulance on the way there. And I got to tell you, the experience when I went to Boston Medical Center was something out of a movie. There had to be 16 or 20 nurses and doctors, and I mean, it felt like everybody in the hospital was in the room with me, which was incredible. But you never want to be the star of that movie.
Right.
And the TPA really worked, because when I went up for my MRI that night, I walked.
Wow.
I was walking that night. Not well.
Sure.
I was walking.
You'd had a rough day.
A very unexpected day, when all things considered. So, and then from there, I ended up in the ICU for a couple of days. They went through all this thing, and I'm trying to comprehend what happened to me. I mean, how could this even be?
Right.
I mean, you go from 1 minute, you're in the best shape of your life. Business is doing great. Your personal life is great. Your marriage is great. Everything is great. And boom, you just hit with this thing, a wall of your life's going to change, but you still haven't grasped that your life is going to change.
Right. That's one of the things that's so interesting about stroke, as compared to a lot of other neuro conditions, which sort of start small and progress over time, is that stroke, you go from being fine or seemingly perfectly fine to, bam, losing all sorts of capabilities in the snap of a finger.
Exactly. And that's one thing that a lot of people around you, they don't understand, especially, in my case, where it wasn't apparent, because I was able to walk and I didn't show any signs of a disability. I was very lucky, but internally I was a mess, and no one could see it. The only person who could see it was really my wife. Mm-hmm. Everyone else thought I looked fine, and I wasn't fine for a long time. So it was a rough road after it all happened.
Right. So a very rough road, a lot of hard work, and overall in that time, that was what, about 2 years ago, and over those past 2 years, it sounds like you've done the work and you've had quite a strong recovery. So what is your life like today?
And there was a lot of, I'm not a religious guy, but I'm just going to say a lot of come to Jesus moments.
Sure.
That I had to accept that the life was going to change. So we had decided after another couple of times going to the hospitals with TIAs and, other incidents of I had an incident on the day before my wedding anniversary where I had a little numbness in my arm because we had a super stressful week, and ended up back in the hospital. And that's when a doctor told me, oh yeah, you can, if you have a lot of stress, you can have a reoccurrence. feeling like you're having a reoccurrence, which is information I would have loved to have known beforehand.
Right.
But it was at that moment, we got home that night and it was pouring rain, and, we had publishers and just left magazines out in front of our warehouse in the pouring rain, and they just sent me an email. Oh yeah, it's, the magazines are there. So I had to wake up my poor wife after 24 hours in the hospital because I couldn't lift anything to get the magazines and bring them into this warehouse. And it's at that moment I said, we've got to make a change. So we decided, to sell the company. And we were very fortunate. I've been fortunate throughout my career to be able to sell companies. So I was able to sell the company basically in one phone call. It took 4 months to close, but it happened very quick. And then I decided I was going to get a job. I did a lot of recovery work, things that you don't hear about so much in the, everyone, they talk about drugs and different things that help you. But what I found helped me the most was one of the doctors talked to me about the medications being plants. And I said, well, that's interesting. So I started researching going to a plant-based diet. So I eat 100% plant-based food now. And then I started going to doing myofascia treatments, and I started doing biofeedback treatments. And I tell you, I was like a different person in 6 months. I was like back, not 100% back to myself, but close enough that most people would never notice. Myofascia is it's the mass of between your skin and your muscle, and they recently started calling it an organ. So what they do is, if it's not a massage, but they actually get down in there and they push the pressure points for the myofascia. And I have to tell you, there's only 2 women who have made me cry in pain, and that's my ex-wife and my myofascia treatment. I mean, I love her, but oh my God, it hurts. But
the one doing the treatment, not the ex-wife.
Yeah, the ex-wife's gone. But yeah, it really hurts. But it works, because before this happened, I couldn't run. I was having a hard time just moving around. And she was able to really focus in on my right side, which is what got affected. And I mean, it's pretty much, I wouldn't know that I go for treatments every couple of weeks, and I feel it has done a world of difference to my entire right side. I don't have any problems with my right side now, which is kind of a miracle. I have to be honest with you.
Right.
So I would recommend that to at least try it. Because she was also a therapist, she worked for a big hospital.
Okay.
And she went down this road because she felt like the big hospitals weren't really helping you with therapy. Okay. And that's what I experienced, because they prescribed me for therapy, and I was just like, these people, they don't even have a plan for me. Mm-hmm. You're just going in there for 45 minutes and leaving. And I said, this is just a waste of time. And that's when I ended up started doing the myofascia and doing some other things on my own. One of my favorite authors was always Stephen Covey, and it's, began with the end in mind, is what do you want? And I wanted to get better. That's what I wanted. It took me a while to realize I was never going to get back to what I was. But on the other side of it is, I just wanted to get better. I wanted to be able to go out and walk with my wife and play with my grandkids and just be able to do a lot of things, even if I couldn't do them at the highest intensity level that I used to do them at. I think that, after you have something like this happen to you, if you can't stop and think about like what type of life you want, I don't know.
After mine, I began sort of rethinking and narrowing down what I want to do career-wise for the rest of my life in terms of focusing that and going into goals with therapy. It's like one of the things I coach a lot of folks on when I talk about public speaking is that before you start preparing a talk, figure out what you want your audience to do. What do you want the result to be from this? And it goes right along with that. Begin with the end in mind. You can't go someplace if you don't know where you want to go. You just can't get there.
Absolutely. You have to focus on what, transition do you want to make? in life, whether it's, for public speaking, for your career, for your life. I mean, you need to think about where it's going, where are you leading to? And I think when you can think that way, you can certainly make a difference in your own life and other people's.
Yeah, one of the first things the therapist always asked in the hospital was, "What is your goal?" And I didn't really understand the question at the time. So if I think I said I just want to get better, which isn't necessarily the best goal. I probably should have said something like world domination.
For sure.
But now my two primary goals. My primary goal with PT is to walk comfortably 3 miles in an hour without my AFO. And for OT, one of my primary goals is to start typing again with my left hand. So, when you can make them more specific, it gives therapists a direction they can take you to and tailor things for that, and gives you something that you can focus on better. And it sounds like working with that particular therapist was key to doing that.
Oh, yeah. And I think if you think that way, if you have a mindset and you say, I'm going to, be able to use my left hand better, I think you can get there. And I think that one of the things I learned through this experience, and I got to talk to a lot of people, and you get to see the support groups. I went to some support groups, and I see them on Facebook all the time, the closed groups of people who've had this happen to them. And if there's a message you can really give to people is it can and does get better if you let it get better, if you work at it to get better. It's not going to just happen, but you got to be kind to yourself too. You can't power through stuff like you did before the injury. You just can't. So you got to figure out a different way to get through it. And that's what I found. That's what really worked for me. I'll tell you, that made a big difference, not trying to power through stuff. Sleep, good hydration, good nutrition, they all actually matter. I definitely sleep more now than I used to. I can tell you that. But I feel, when I get a good night's sleep, I feel good. And if I get good hydration, I feel good. And the days you don't, I didn't drink enough water, you feel it. You just feel it more. You're more sensitive to it, I think, than you were beforehand.
Right. Absolutely. So you've made this transition also to this this plant-based diet. Was that something that you were doing prior to the stroke as well, or were you a big meat eater back then? Or?
Oh yeah, when I was training for Ironman, I was on a seafood diet, and I ate all day. I was probably consuming like 6,000 calories a day, and I could just eat a whole pizza. But that was life. I was working out so much, but I ate awful. My nutrition was just awful. And, I would say half of my calories came from meat. I never ate a vegetable, only when I was forced to. So,
it was on the pizza counts, doesn't it?
Yeah, not really. Not really. And a little bit of, spinach or whatever, not so much. But then I just, I started doing a lot of research about it, and it was because I had an artery problem. One of the things that they say with the plant-based diet is it can repair your arteries. So I started thinking about that, and my wife's a vegetarian, so we kind of started watching all those shows, like Fox Over Knives and Cowspiracy and stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm going down this road. So I did. I went, I thought about what that doctor said about, all the medications are from plants. And I said, well, there's got to be something to this. So I went in June of last year, I think it was, end of May, beginning of June. I went, basically vegetarian, about 75% vegan. Yeah, it's been interesting. When you go out to eat, it's not as exciting as it used to be. Because now you're kind of looking at you got a much limited menu unless you go to a vegan restaurant. But beyond that, eating at home is fine. It's great. I don't have it. I'm never hungry. Mm-hmm. It's just it was just like a way of just thinking about a way of life, And I think too, like this having this happen to you kind of brought me down to maybe some of that stuff, that crunchy stuff that you feel like, I want to be leave a less of a footprint, and you start thinking about the animals and the treatment that they're getting, and I don't know, so I just went down this road.
So as you're going down this road and all these other roads, what's sort of been the most important lesson you've had to learn through this process?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is to listen to my body. And I think that even if a stroke comes out of nowhere for somebody, if they were listening more to their body, there may be indications it's going to happen, or something is going to happen. It might not be a stroke. It might be a heart attack. It might be something else serious. But I think your body is talking to you all the time, and I was not listening. I can tell you that.
It's interesting to hear that from an athlete.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I know you're out in Seattle, but if you follow baseball at all, and you see like a Dustin Pedroia, that's the type of person I always have been. I was never the best, but I always tried the hardest. And that's what I've done in everything I've done is I just tried too hard. And I wasn't listening. I mean, I was hurting. My entire body was hurt. My knee hurt. My shoulder was in pain all the time from swimming. And then the working, I had different issues going on, and I just was not listening. My body was telling me, stop, relax. You can't sustain this. And I didn't listen. And it did not work out for me to run at that level all the time. And I paid a pretty big price for it.
Never the way you want to have to go ahead and pay that price, because as much as you recover, it's still something you really don't want to have gone through in the first place.
No, it's not. And I guess in one way I have to look at it like I'm fortunate in a way that it happened, because it got me out of the business I was in. It's got me to take a closer look at my life and what's important to me. And now, I kind of got lucky. I mean, I have a really good job, and I love what I'm doing, and I don't have all the responsibilities of owning a company anymore. And I feel like I have a better life now than I did before this happened.
Fantastic. That's a fairly common refrain I hear from a lot of folks. It's interesting when I talk to other folks in support groups or online, the common theme from most folks, and not all, obviously, is, I feel lucky because, well, this could have gone so much worse, or because it made me rethink a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Either way, I could look at, I've been fortunate that because of everything that happened, I could, I don't have, the doctor on my last appointment said, I have zero deficiencies. So I was very, very fortunate that way. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, you're unfortunate because it happened to you. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of like, I live on Cape Cod, so I ride my bicycle. And when I ride my bicycle in the Cape Cod Canal, I was always trying to go faster and faster and faster. Now I watch the guys who are fishing. I'll look for a seal or a dolphin or something in the canal or a nice boat, and I'll stop and take a picture. And I just have changed my thought process towards this whole thing of like, life is pretty good, and you need to enjoy it because you don't know when it's going to change.
What do you wish more survivors and caregivers knew early on in the process, sort of those early days after a stroke? What should they know sooner than they eventually figure out?
For a survivor, right, you need to think, I would tell people early on, it's probably going to get better for most of you, but you need to give yourself the time and do the right things, do the research. And I'm not telling you to be a vegan, and I'm not telling you to do biofeedback, and I'm not telling you to do myopatch, but they worked for me. And I would say you do whatever you can. Don't just listen to your doctor. I think that there's a lot of alternative treatments and medications out there, things that can help you, that they don't, rubber stamp. And I think that you need to be your own advocate, and don't beat yourself up. You had something really serious happen to you. for a caregivers, I would say patience, because the person had just had the rug taken out from under them, and they don't even know what happened to them. They can't even comprehend. I couldn't comprehend what happened to me. It took me 6-7 months to really totally grasp. I can't lift a 50-pound box anymore. It took me it really took me a long time. For family, I would say, the person is not the same, and you need to give them time. Just because they look the same doesn't mean they are the same. And, you need to give them time, and you need to, accept the fact that they're not the same, and really figure that out in your own relationship with them. For people in the medical profession, I would say embrace what you don't know, and learn from it. And always be a student, because so many different doctors. I was in Boston Medical Center, so that's a learning school, and there's a ton of students there. And I would see 15 different doctors every day, and they were all different. And I was kind of like, a lot of people came to see me because I was a triathlete guy in there, you know what I mean? And I got a lot of that. But they were constantly asking questions, but I didn't get enough answers from the people, and it took too long to get all the answers. And that was, I would say, I found that extremely frustrating. So personally, I don't know what your experience was. If you found that, did you experience the same? Or?
I was very fortunate at Swedish Medical Center here in Seattle. They were very forthcoming with answers to me, but that may also be because I was also very aggressive not necessarily aggressive, but assertive in asking questions. And I asked a ton of questions of everyone. And once you start asking questions and in ways that they can answer, you get a lot of answers. I started asking about things like, what muscle are we working on here? Why you talk about neurofatigue and the muscle getting tired. Why is that? What's happening? And so I dived into that a lot, but in general, they were also very good at proactively telling me and telling my girlfriend, this is probably some of the stuff that's going to happen. This is called muscle tone. This is what subluxation is that we have to watch out for to support that arm. That's why, you're going to be propping that arm up on pillows. This is why you have those leg squeezy things on overnight. This is, this is why you're going to find you start just crying at random times. And they were very good at telling me what to expect.
Yeah, that's great that you had that, that they gave you that, they responded to you because you were asking the questions, and they gave that to you. I think you were fortunate to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more survivors I talk about, the more unique I realize that experience was.
Yeah, there was, because the stroke was, when this happened, I basically had 6 mini strokes, but they were the TPA and everything kind of like I was fortunate it was able to attack that really quick. But the vertebral artery dissection is so rare that they just don't know anything about it, or they know very little about it. And the only way they know how to, there's 2 ways to treat it. They give you blood thinners, and they hope, and it fixes itself, or they operate on it and they put like this little metal mesh thing into your artery. I didn't have that. Mine's healed on its own, but I mean, they don't really, they just wasn't a lot of information about it. That was so frustrating. And we got more information. We ended up buying a book on Amazon from a woman in North Carolina who wrote it. I think her name is Mandy Anderson.
Okay.
And we got more information out of that book than we did from the doctors about the VAD. It was incredible. It was totally incredible. I'll send you a link to that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. There are some great books out there. I think Jill Bolte Taylor's My Stroke of Insight is a great book, especially for family members to read about the experience. And I really got a lot out of I think it's Allison Shapiro's Healing into Possibility.
Yeah. Have you seen the TED Talk about the woman who had the stroke?
Yes. It's one of the top 10 TED Talks of all time, where Dr. Taylor talks about her experience as a brain researcher having a stroke and sort of realizing what's happening to her as it's happening. And what's really interesting about that story, well, there's lots of really interesting things about it, about how some survivors, they lose the ability to filter out just the noise and lights and everything of life, and it's just sensory overload, and having a whole bunch of people in your room can actually be painful for you. But the other thing that was really interesting is it really emphasizes the importance of time. It's what's emphasized in your story as well, is getting to the hospital so fast that TPA is possible, because TPA is only possible within 6 hours of the onset of symptoms. And in my case, I went to bed fine and I woke up with my symptoms in place. Since my last known good was like 6.5 hours ago, I was immediately out of the TPA window, so they couldn't even do that. But with Dr. Taylor's story, she talks about as it's happening, she's noticing mental capabilities going offline, and she needs to realize she needs to call somebody for help, but then she can't really remember what the phone is or how to operate it. And the longer you wait, the more capabilities you can lose. So calling emergency services as soon as you think you might need it is so important.
It's the difference in what life is gonna, what happens next. It's vital, and it's under talked about. I think I just find it interesting. I've been exposed to it more now because of what happened to me, but I mean, never talked about this. I actually hadn't known anybody that had a stroke, like really known them until it happened to me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I know of people talked about this person had one, that person had one, but I don't ever remember seeing them or seeing the effects of it or being educated on how important it was. I mean, people talk about heart attacks and aspirins and things along those lines, but you just don't seem to hear as much about it, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of people having strokes. And as you identified, I can't remember if it was during the podcast or before, there's more and more young people having them. And that's scary.
It really is. It really is. And the whole recovery and rehab field is really focused around folks who have a stroke in their 70s and how you get those folks back to life. What we're starting to see now is folks are realizing you really need to look at what you do with younger survivors who are not, towards the end of their life. They've still got decades ahead of themselves, and they need to get back to work, and they need to get these different capabilities back. And how do you treat it for actual recovery and getting back to where you need to be?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the system is set to get you to a certain, it's kind of like the education system. They set it so you can get to a certain place and then you're on your own. And it's really unfortunate I could tell you one, like I was looking everywhere for asphyxia stuff because I felt like I had some of it, and I might, for all I know, but I still leave out words when I type sometimes, mm-hmm. But I couldn't find anything. I found like one book through Amazon. I mean, I couldn't, even like the stuff that they had on the iPad was just inferior. It just didn't, the apps didn't work. I was just surprised that they don't have more material for people to really get back to where they were. There's not enough focus on that, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to start to change over the next few years. But yeah, that really needs to happen. The other thing that's really interesting in looking at the perspective that therapists have too versus survivors and the caregivers, or rather the medical team, is that when they see us for the first time, we've already lost all those capabilities. Any growth or any improvement they see is growth from zero.
Right.
Whereas we're going into it, whereas maybe we were a 100 before and now we've dropped down to a 50, and if we get 5 more points, we're up to 55, and that's nothing. From the medical professional's perspective, we've gone from 0 to 5, and that's awesome.
Yeah. They don't have a perspective of what you were before it happened because most of them don't know you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the people who know you are your family or your friends or your parent. It's like they know, but the medical professions don't really know, and you can't fault them. How would they know?
No, absolutely. And I have had, I say that and make those observations. I have had some absolutely fantastic therapists and some fantastic members of that team. It's just one of those things where you just can't have that perspective based on the job that they have to do, and our perspective is coming from a different place.
Yeah. It's really interesting to go through it. When I told the doctor, the chief of neurology, about what it really worked for me, he just blew it all off. Right? He blew it. He was like, "Oh, that's not real medicine." I'm like, well, it's working for me. I mean, I've done a 180 here. I mean, like anybody could see that, it's just so interesting to see how they react to you when you do something. It almost feels like I understand they're the expert. They have all the schooling, but it doesn't mean they know everything. And you might be showing them something that they didn't know existed that could help other people.
Right. I've become real fond of the phrase, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid.
Yeah, it seems that, people will debunk it, but man, I mean, I don't know. Have you ever done or heard of biofeedback?
I have heard of biofeedback. I haven't done that directly. I've been doing some eSTEM to work with that and sort of teach my brain to, try and work those fingers again and at least keep the muscles used to doing that. I've done some of the mirror therapy to try and bring more of those fingers back, and a lot with some work with visualization, which has been helpful as well.
The biofeedback is used in Europe quite extensively. And they've shown tremendous success with stroke patients with biofeedback in Europe.
Okay.
So what they do is they basically read your brainwaves, and I thought, and I got to be honest with you, I thought it was total BS. I mean, I really liked the woman, but I was like, no way, this is not real. But she started telling me things about my body I never knew existed, or that she would have to know me to have known that these things were wrong, or it happened to me, whatever. And I tell you, my wife was like, "You're like a different person now." And it took a few appointments, but it's made a huge difference for me. It got rid of my fatigue. It helped my cognitive abilities tremendously. It helped me in so many different ways. I can't even tell you. It's worth looking into. I'm not saying it's going to work for you, but it worked tremendously for me.
Absolutely. And even just looking into things is in itself a form of therapy. Everything can be therapy if you approach it the right way. Let's just say, for example, I'm not saying that's the case here, but even if it is a placebo effect is still an effect. And what I want are results and effects.
Absolutely. They talked about that in one of the wars. What was it, Vietnam or whatever? They were giving people placebos for things, and they thought they never felt better. So, I mean, mind over matter it's a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. It's one more way that we can leverage neuroplasticity by once you convince the brain that something works, the brain wires it up to make it work.
Yeah, even when absolutely. It's a powerful thing. If you can it's the same thing about if you're working towards a goal. If you have a strong mindset that this can happen, you can make it happen. And I think this is the same thing about getting better and going through the recovery, of disabilities that you might end up with. You can get better. There's tremendous stories of it. And I had to believe that myself. Yeah, and they're out there. There's great stories out there, and I think a lot of it is that positive mentality. I can do this, and don't give up. Because you can get better.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
I alluded to this earlier, but I really feel that you need to listen to your body. And I think your body will, if you listen, your body is going to talk to you. And it will tell you, I can't do this today. I can't do this today. You're going too hard. You're not going hard enough, or I need more water, or I need more rest. And I really think it's about focusing on listening to your body and then following that path, because that has done me personally a world of good. I did not listen to my body in the beginning. I mean, I ended up back in the hospital. I was home for 2 days, home for a week, and I ended up back in the hospital because I did not listen to my body, and I was back in for like 10 days. And it was not a good experience because I wouldn't listen. And if I had just listened and relaxed and had faith I was going to get better, I would have not have had that return trip to the hospital, which was not a fun experience to be in.
If folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
They could get me on LinkedIn. If it's a business thing, I'm on LinkedIn. Thomas B. Hannon Jr. They get me on Facebook. And I feel free if somebody wants to just email me and talk to me about what I've done and their story. I'd be happy to talk to them. They can, I can give you my email address, which is tohannon@aol.com.
Awesome. And we will have that in the show notes over at strokecast.com/Tom as well.
No, that'd be great. And anybody who wants to talk, I'd be more than happy to talk to them about their experiences. And, if anything I could do for anybody, it's a tough thing to happen.
It sure is. Tom, congratulations on coming back as well as you have. And thank you so much for joining us on Strokecast this week. This has been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Tom has made a habit of trying different things to get the results he wants in his life, from his pre-stroke athleticism and entrepreneurial efforts to his choices around a plant-based diet, biofeedback, and myofascia treatment. So what do you think about Tom's story? Let us know in the comments over at strokecast.com/Tom. Visit strokecast.com to see all the links and resources we talked about today and to connect with Tom. Share this episode with someone else today. Just give them the link strokecast.com/Tom. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.